Welcome to the Introverted Doctor podcast, dedicated to uncovering myths, mistakes, and misconceptions that holds us back from living our best life at work, home, and play. In each episode, I'll be focusing on different aspects of communication techniques, mindset, routines, habits, and behaviors with the goal to show how to eliminate anxiety, trip-ups, and unwelcome results that comes from ineffective communications. Welcome back. I hope you had a great week. This is the fourth and final part of the series, the 6 human needs, or as I refer to as the Wheel of Needs. As a quick recap, this framework that I'm sharing with you is really, without a doubt, one of the most powerful frameworks I've shared with people, with medical students, residents, or conferences. People ask me to share this again and again, and I really highly recommend you listening to the whole series because it'll help you in your own life, and it'll also help others. And it's an incredibly valuable tool about understanding people's behaviors and the world. In episode 1 and 2, they were about the needs of certainty, uncertainty, recognition, and love, and the importance they have in our lives. But in a nutshell, in terms of the first 2 needs, certainty and uncertainty and variety, we need to have a level of security in our health, relationships, and financial life, and that can vary from person to person. The need for variety is also important in that we need to challenge our mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and that also varies from individual to individual as well. The need for recognition and significance is something we all need, and we all need to meet this need, and that can be met in positive, negative, or neutral ways. And the 4th need was the need for love and connection. And that need is very crucial so that we feel connected with people and our culture and our and just to feel wanted, really. And the 4th need was the need for love and connection. That need is the need for how we connect with others and ourselves, whether it's our peers, family, or partner. Now, this is highly simplified. Now, the 4 needs, certainty, variety, significance, recognition, love, and connection, are all called survival needs or needs of the personality. These needs are met, as I mentioned, by various degrees. These 4 needs shape most of the wheel, but they don't complete it. And the individuals who never move beyond these 4 needs, they never feel a greater sense of happiness. We know people who've committed suicide, celebrities who've committed suicide. They have a high need. They've met all those 4 needs at a high level, but they've never experienced joy or happiness consistently because they've never met the next 2 needs for thriving, which are the needs for growth and contribution. The need for growth and contribution, they were covered in the last episode. They give a person's life meaning, and it gives the person level of joy and passion and realization. And you've all experienced this at some level, and when you've been feeling connected with the world and who you are, there was definitely elements of growth and contribution in that. So how do we use these needs or to shape or change a behavior? And that's what this episode is about. I saw a patient who was addicted to alcohol, and he was suffering tremendously with that addiction, and from a medical point of view, he was having early signs of liver disease. Now, he had gone through many addiction programs, and they couldn't help or change his behavior. He was fully aware that drinking was killing him, but he couldn't change, and he didn't know what to do anymore. And he became stuck, and he didn't know how to get unstuck. And so one of my colleagues asked me if I would see him, so I did. And one of the first questions I asked him, I said, when do you drink, and how long have you been drinking? He told me, Doc, I never really drank a whole lot until my kids grew up and they went to university. And I never really drink much at home. I just drink when I'm around my buddies after work. We work on some very cool stuff. We restore old cars and motorbikes. in my buddy's garage, and we do all kinds of amazing, we do an amazing job We get a little bit of cash from it, but when we sell it, but that's not, it's a real hobby. And every time we're working on those projects, we're drinking about 4 or 5 beers a day. And Doc, I also grew up in a family where my dad felt that, real men drink. So I would feel kind of like, feel like I would be a sissy if I stopped drinking. And I don't know what my buddies would think. So that was his response to that question. So I didn't have to be a genius to figure out that he was meeting his need for variety by working on new cool vehicles. And he was meeting his need for love and connection by doing that with his friends. And he was also meeting his need for significance or recognition. So I didn't have to be a genius to see that he was meeting his need for variety by working on by him working on these new vehicles. And he was meeting his need for love and connection because he was doing with his friends who he really cared about. And he was meeting his need for significance or recognition. His need for recognition was strongly conditioned by his father, who felt, real men should be drinking. So no wonder he couldn't stop drinking. To stop drinking would mean that he would lose his life and he would, have to live totally different. And so he felt he was stuck, essentially. So he was meeting 3 of the 6 needs at a high level, like a 10 out of 10. So it became a habit for him, and it was conditioned. And when you have 3 needs that you meet at a high level, you form a habit. You basically condition a behavior. So for him, it would have been hard for him to quit if we didn't do anything to change those 3 needs. So part of that was working on his psychology and challenging his idea and perspective. I have a friend of mine who exercises and eats healthy, and he does this so consistently. He never misses a beat. And when I asked him, how do you do that? How do you maintain that level of discipline? And he said, it's really not that hard because, I feel like I'm contributing to myself, my family, and to others. When I have more energy, I'm able to show up more. So I feel better connected with others. And I vary my exercise and the meals that I eat. So there's a lot of variety. And, I feel there's a lot of growth and contribution by doing that consistently. So for me, exercising and eating right, absolutely easy to do. So it wasn't hard. So he understood human needs psychology, that was the way he kept on a better eating and exercise program. So to not exercise would go against his need structure. This type of person, always has a greater level of success in continuing and conditioning that kind of habit, because it doesn't become boring. It doesn't become lifeless, and it was really smart because he understood 6 human needs psychology, as I've already said. Now, getting back to the patient who was an alcoholic, as a clinician, I knew that what was feeding his behavior to drink. So if I wanted to make an impact, I had to address those 3 needs in order so that he would change or hope for any type of change to happen. So as a quick summary of what happened, I ended up, challenging his father's level of significance and asked him, do you think your dad would think of you as being a real man, if you didn't stop doing something that would kill you? Would he define a real man as someone who couldn't control a behavior? And he stopped, and that really shifted his thinking. And luckily for me, he said, I guess not. I think he'd think I was pretty stupid for doing something that could kill me. And so that was one area I had challenged. And in fact, he said, I think, real man should man up and make a decision and then stick with it. In terms of connection, I also challenged him and asked him, how would you feel if, you were attending one of your friend's funeral and they never told you that they had a similar problem and they died from liver disease, but they never trusted you enough, would you feel hurt? He goes, yeah. Well, how do you think they'll feel if they discover, because your wife will tell them or other people will know that it was all the drinking that killed you? And then he said, I never thought of it that way. So that helped him change that at a whole new level. In fact, his friends actually kept him very accountable. And they even went and saw their doctor and started rethinking about how much they were drinking. And they became educated. So their friends actually said, you know what? We're not going to let you drink when we're working around here. And so that changed for him as well. So he was able to, continue meeting his needs, and simply by reframing his choices, because I explained to him human needs psychology. So I'm going to move on to another section, which is, how do our needs affect us in our relationship? And the best way I can, share this is by telling you a true story of a patient encounter I had a few years ago. And here's what happened. And, just before I was entering the exam room, I could hear Kelly. We'll call her Kelly. But that wasn't her real name. She was crying, and I could literally visualize the tears. She had that deep crying sob where you couldn't catch your breath, and I was like, I was thinking, what's going on? Anyway, I opened the exam door, came in, sat down. I waited for her to stop crying, and then I asked her. I said, "So what's happening?" And she said, "Dr. Chavla, I don't know what to do with my husband. We're fighting over simple things, and he doesn't even come home anymore, and he's not taking and answering my calls, and I haven't heard from him in 3 days. The kids are confused. I'm confused. I know it's not another woman. I just don't know what to do. I feel helpless. My friends and family tell me, they don't know what to say to me. My sister tells me that I should leave him. My mom says, there must be something else going on, and I just don't know what to do." My old self, the young doctor in me, would have felt hopeless. I would have probably stumbled through that conversation. But because I knew human needs psychology, I knew what to do. So I asked her, what was your marriage like? What's it like at home? And in a really short amount of time, I learned, literally in 3 sentences, what Kelly's top 2 needs were that really governed her life. And that need was her need for love and growth. She said she loved raising her children and watching them develop, but she was finding that her role and level of importance was changing as they were becoming more independent and not needing her as much as they were heading into teenage years. And they were feeling more independent. The children were having a greater need for variety and testing, and so they were naturally moving away from their need for certainty, which Kelly was providing them. So her children were her main avenue for meeting her top need of love and connection. So she decided, I'll get a job. And when I asked her if she needed, if the family needed extra income, she said no. Her husband had brought in enough money, and so she was able to stay at home, and which is what she initially preferred. Now, to make things worse, in Kelly's mind, she ended up finding a job with an overbearing boss, and a job that she really hated because she wasn't getting the connection at work. And she hated it because that's what unconsciously she was looking for: more social interaction, more level of connection. She wasn't looking to get more money, so that job wasn't even meeting her connection. So then I asked her about her husband, Peter, which is really not his real name. And I quickly discovered that what his top 2 needs were, and his top 2 needs were significance and certainty. He grew up in a very abusive home where both his mother and father were verbally and sometimes physically abusive to him. He grew up with words of discouragement and was consistently told, he was good for nothing and he was an idiot, he was a loser. And when Peter met Kelly, he broke through those chains of negativity and abuse because Kelly was all about love and connection and nurturing. And he was eventually able to get a good education. He went to get a great job and provide for his family. And he also became the president of the local billiard club. And Kelly described him as a very kind man. So in summary, he was significant and certainty driven. And that wasn't really hard to decode. He met his needs primarily by providing for his family and believed in a predictable and stable environment. Peter, who was also my patient, later told me that he never wanted to be like his parents and strongly believed in the family unit. But now, things had changed dramatically. He wasn't responding to her text and only came home in the mornings and evening to make breakfast and dinner for the kids and the family. He wouldn't even sleep at home and stayed at his sister's house and slept there. Now, Kelly also hadn't heard from him in 3 days. And Peter's sister told Kelly that he didn't want to talk to Kelly anymore. I mean, that's a big difference, big change for what Kelly had described was generally a good marriage. Kelly said in the past they had minor arguments, but now those small arguments had become bigger than ever, and she couldn't figure out why. And they were fighting at a level that neither of them had ever experienced. And most importantly, neither of them didn't know how they got there and how to get out. Remember, Kelly described her marriage as a good marriage with very little disagreements. So Kelly was very open to me and shared her story and her situation. But here's the interesting note. I had never met Kelly before, and in reality, she didn't really know me. And we had a very brief, interaction. But she came to me because I was a doctor, and she really had no one else that she could turn to provide her with some insight and help. And as in all interactions, trust and understanding is crucial to help find out what's happening and to be able to help her. Now, as a clinician, if you don't have that trust or connection, it can really be hard to help influence, change and help people, to provide value in any respect. So I was being privy to hearing her life story simply because of my title as a doctor, but she also was so desperate, she didn't know what else to do. Now, after I explained the 6 human needs with Kelly, she understood where she contributed to the interactions and why she had felt so disempowered and why her husband Peter had felt so disempowered by his behavior. She told me she wasn't meeting his needs, and his work friends were also teasing him about, quote, you're wearing a dress, you're not being the man of the house. He was feeling insignificant. She also now understood why he never wanted to deposit her checks into the bank account. And then she started saying things that really escalated, comments that really hurt him, like, I don't need your money. I have my own money to buy the groceries. And then she said the texting and the communication stopped when she really got mad at him and said, who needs your money anyway? I work too, And so it was very easy to see how Peter was affected. Kelly was also very self-reflective on her own primary vehicles, and how her need for love and connection was really through her children. And her additional source could have been through her husband, but it wasn't. When she had stopped crying and developed a new appreciation of her world, she could see how she could change her responses and how she could realign things in her marriage, simply by me explaining the 6 human needs. And that resulted in their reuniting of the relationship, and they were able to live in greater harmony because they understood each other's need structures. And in the past, as a physician, I would have probably stumbled through that type of interaction. I don't know what I would have done, but since I've known human needs psychology, or the wheel of needs, and I'll share that with patients. In the interaction like that, or if I'm trying to change a behavior, I'll just simply say, I want to share with you something many people have found helpful, and that might help light a little bit of sunshine into this scenario. And I pull out a piece of paper and I draw a little circle, and I explain the 6 human needs. This model of learning is incredibly valuable for many reasons. It allows people to come to a better understanding of their actions and what drives them, but it also allows them to see what their top 2 needs are and how it drives in everything what they do, but it also allows them to see what the top 2 needs are for other people and what's driving them. And when you do that, you can remove judgment from a situation. It allows you to have greater empathy for the other person, and it also helps changes your response to the person and ultimately the situation. The other important factor about this model is that it is simple yet not simplistic. It gives people a framework that they can use continuously after they've left your office. It simply helps them understand themselves and the world better. The challenge is that there can be so many opinions and ideas, which makes it difficult to organize a person's thoughts and plans to create action. And confusion happens in these situations, especially in relationships when there's so many moving parts and so much history. But the 6 human needs helps clarify the situation and helps create greater clarity and actionable results. I hope this episode served you in some way, and if you go to the website, you will find a free questionnaire that you can use to uncover your top 2 needs and help create greater understanding. Please use that framework as you see fit. I went into all these episodes in a bit of detail so that it might make greater sense, and you can certainly simplify it. It certainly doesn't take me an hour to explain these 6 human needs as it did over these 4 episodes, but you get a better idea. I hope this podcast served you in some way, and if you feel it helped you or could help others, please share it with your friends or colleagues, and you can get a transcription of this podcast if you go to the website, theintroverteddoctor.com. And if you sign up for the weekly emails, I will keep you posted on the latest things that are happening and the weekly podcast episodes. And I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you've listened to the other episodes, I thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I hope that you live your best life at work, home, and play. I'm Dr. Lalit Chava, and until next time, I'll see you next week.